whatever kind of attack there is, whether it's your government making crazy rules or things like that, or it is a radical Islamist attack, you need to keep yourself in the best shape possible so that you can be more resilient to whatever comes.
I am a husband, a father, a lawyer, a Christian, and a proud Canadian. I started this series because it was clear that our nation needs truth. Not just another biased narrative, but real information of substance. We need access to facts and the freedom to think for ourselves. I'm Leighton Grey, and this is Grey Matter.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Grey Matter. Well, today we're going to talk about a terrifying subject, terror. What is it? How does it affect us? These are important questions, particularly given what's going on in society today. In fact, we're always hearing about environmental catastrophe and Armageddon on that front. There's threats of World War III with what's going on with NATO and the war over in Russia and in the Ukraine. And just most recently, we're hearing word about a new strain of the COVID-19 variant, which we all thought was behind us. And this one has been dubbed the Eris variant. I did a quick search on Google. I discovered that Eris is a Greek demon of strife, war, haunting the battlefield, and delighting in human bloodshed. So it's a good question about why are we so scared? Who's trying to scare us? And how does this affect us? And so we thought it would be a great idea to have somebody on the program who knows a lot about this, who's an expert in the sort of the psychology of terror and how it impacts people. Both adults and children. Her name is Dr. Carole Lieberman. Thanks for coming on the show today. It's a pleasure to have you on as our special guest.
Well, thank you.
All right. So Dr. Carole is, she's known as America's psychiatrist. She's a board-certified Beverly Hills psychiatrist. She's a best-selling author. We're going to talk about, especially about a couple of her books today that are featured on our reading list. She's also been very much a public figure in terms of being on television. She's been on Tucker and Laura Ingraham and Newsmax. She's been on the Oprah Show, Today Show. So she's very well known and also very well respected. And so we're excited to have her on the show. Before we dive into the topic at hand, of course, as we always do, we've got a few framing aphorisms to set up our discussion. The first one is from a person named Yoko Ito, who wrote that if we destroy human rights and rule of law in response to terrorism, they have won. The second quotation is from a very well-known author and unfortunately a book that's very well-known now. It's George Orwell in 1984. He wrote, "The object of terrorism is terrorism. The object of oppression is oppression. The object of torture is torture. The object of murder is murder. The object of power is power. Now do you begin to understand me?" And lastly, from an American commentator, Bobby Kennedy, who once wrote, the big threat to America is the way we react to terrorism by throwing away what everybody values about our country, a commitment to human rights. America is a great nation because we are a good nation. When we stop being a good nation, we stop being great. So, Dr. Carole, I'd like to start off with perhaps a discussion, if you could give us maybe a thumbnail sketch of because you've written so much about it and talked so much about it in your books and your discourse, but maybe the concept of terror itself, as you've studied it, in a psychological sense, and also most people think that they have an understanding. Most people like me think we have an understanding of what PTSD is, but we probably don't, and so that's something that maybe we could get a more clear and concise understanding of what that is. Could you talk about those concepts just maybe by way of setup?
Well, first of all, terrorism is the use of force, the use of strategies to manipulate people by terrorizing them, such that you get your political or socio-political agenda met. And that's sort of a generic way of looking at it. Now, when 9/11 happened, maybe I can start that way. When 9/11 happened, I'm a born and bred New Yorker, but I was living in California by the time 9/11 happened. And my heart, though, is still in New York. And so that really had a profound impact on me, seeing New York destroyed, of course, then the Pentagon and the Pennsylvania Field and so on. And it resonated with me in terms of realizing that this was something that for my lifetime, and probably many lifetimes to come after that, that is going to be the number one problem that we are facing, that America is facing, and that, of course, much of the world is facing.
Right.
And I'm talking about radical Islamist terrorism in particular.
Right.
So in America, and I don't know if it's this way in Canada, but in America, a lot of people have gotten complacent and thinking, look, we haven't heard from them in a while, and it's okay. But that is so not the truth. And so when 9/11 happened, just to go back to the beginning, that I became, what I now call the terrorist therapist. I have it trademarked. So, because the idea was and is to help people not only get over 9/11, which is still affecting all of us today, but also to prepare to become more prepared, more stronger physically and psychologically, more resilient for the future, the future attacks and so on. And I don't know if exactly what the current case is in Canada, but here, we are more at risk today. America is more at risk today than from a 9/11 type attack or any kind of terrorist attack than we were before 9/11.
Why do you say that, Dr. Carole?
That's because it starts out with the fact that we are so complacent, and we're not, see something, the saying, probably you have that in Canada too, if you see something, say something.
Right.
Well, people aren't looking anymore. They're not expecting to see anything. But in the meantime, first of all, we have a President Biden, who is really being, the White House is really being ruled. Biden is just the puppet, and it's really being ruled by Obama. And Obama is the president who opened America up to be more vulnerable to terrorism than any other president. And so with him basically running Biden, running the White House, there are fewer things being done to protect us.
On this topic, you've mentioned that you've written a lot of op-eds, Dr. Carole. One of them that I read, which sort of ties in with 9/11, or might, I'm interested to hear what you have to say about this, is this orange air hellscape is dangerous to your psyche and not just your body. And of course, this came about because of the situation where we had these large-scale forest fires in Canada. The smoke and everything was going down into the eastern seaboard of the United States. And it just had this sort of hellish sky. And my understanding is that you wrote about it because it raised maybe the specter and was reminiscent of 9/11. Is that right? And you talked about the psychological impact. You want to explore that a little bit?
Sure. Yes, there were certain similarities in the sense of 9/11. The sky in Manhattan was similar. There was ash, falling from the sky, and it was cloudy, and and it was orange during some of the period of time. The orange skies from the fires triggered PTSD in people who remembered 9/11. I mean, who were there or who saw enough television shows of it, which is another thing that you don't really, particularly for 9/11, they did a study, and you didn't have to be in Manhattan or near the Pentagon or near the Pennsylvania Field to have PTSD. If you watched hours and hours and hours, like we pretty much all did, of the planes going into the Twin Towers, that in itself, for some people, and depending upon the number of hours and depending upon your psychological makeup, that gave people PTSD who weren't anywhere near New York.
Right.
And we are more at risk. You know, there's the southern border and the northern border, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Where people are coming over who are on terrorist watch lists.
Yeah.
And, you know, we only know this by the ones that they caught. How many did they not catch, you know, who are coming over with intentions to commit terror attacks? Also, we after the surrender in Afghanistan, we took back. It was such a chaotic time and so on, and we flew in 80,000 or so Afghans. Now, we did that because a lot of those people were translators and helping our troops and so on. But there was no vetting. They like to say that there was some vetting, or, you know, it wasn't perfect or whatever. But basically, anybody could get on the plane and come here. And so that is just, you know, seeded all over America. And there are, I mean, in other words, they don't have to come in a plane anymore. I mean, you know, a 9/11 type plane and drop bombs or go into, you know, drive the plane through something. There are people already here who will be happy to perpetrate terror attacks. So, and you were mentioning woke. Our military is in such bad shape. We don't have enough soldiers, enough people in all of the parts of the military, and a large part of that is because people who want to join the military, whether it's men or women, they do it because they feel patriotism. They want to risk their life to protect the country. Right. Well, you know, with all of the military becoming woke, and even, I don't know if you saw this, all these things that you like can't believe are happening. It was the Navy, I believe, who used a transsexual, transgender, whatever he or she was, to be the digital ambassador for the Navy.
Yes.
And so, did you see that?
Yeah, I did.
I mean, you know, do you really have to be a psychiatrist to realize that is not the kind of thing that is going to attract people to the military? I mean, that is not why people join the military. I just wrote another op-ed that will hopefully be coming out soon, where I talk about how this time, you know, the next 9/11 or the next terror attack, there won't be this rush. We won't hear the rush of footsteps of people going to sign up, to enlist in the military. What we're going to hear is crickets.
I was reading something the other day, and I wanted to get your take on this, and it's about this concept of demoralization, you know, destruction of maybe, let's call them, Western values. And you know, this little piece, it says, you know, how do you do it? Well, you get them away from religion. Encourage their interest in sex, as you were saying, make them superficial, talking about kids, by focusing their interest in sports, sensual entertainments, and trivialities. Always preach true democracies, but seize power as fast and ruthlessly as possible. Encourage government extravagance, destroy its credit. This is sounding really familiar. Produce fear with rising prices, inflation, and general discontent. Encourage disorders and foster a lenient attitude towards disorders. By specious argument, cause the breakdown of the old moral virtues, honesty, sobriety, and self-restraint, and cause registration of firearms to leave the population defenseless. That was written by Vladimir Ilyich Lenin in 1921.
Oh, wow.
Now that's how to demoralize, you know, children, and let's say demoralize or terrorize children. That seems to be happening in a very prevalent way in Western society, isn't it? The children seem to be a focal point of these attacks, and that seems to me that's part of the reason why you wrote your most recent book, right?
Well, I mean, Lions and Tigers and Terrorists, oh my, How to Protect Your Child in a Time of Terror, is the first half of the book is for parents and teachers, and the second half is a picture book for kids. And so, like, for example, there's a picture of a bully on a playground. So when I say a terrorist is like a bully on the playground, he wants to get his way and so on.
Right. So it's like an allegory, sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so it is true. And I talk about, do you remember the shoe bomber? And
Oh,
I
yes.
talk about, of course, 9/11. And I talk about, what was it? The man who had a bomb in his underwear on a plane.
Oh, yes.
And just, and I don't know, the major, the Boston Marathon, the major incidents of terrorism, classic incidents. But when I wrote that, which actually it was not that long ago, but at that time, it wasn't as obvious, at least not to me, how much danger we're in from our own government in terms of the things that you were reading, and how
Right.
prevalent all these things were, and how, really, like, for example, in the schools, with the teachers trying to get kids to be any gender but the gender they were born with, or the sex they were born with.
Right.
And that these things started, I mean, we're kind of seeing it more now, because I think because of the lockdowns, that parents got to see some of what the kids were learning. But really, that was the seeds for that were sown a long time ago. Because in the teachers' colleges, where teachers were taught to teach these kinds of things, same thing with CRT, critical race theory. And racism is worse today than ever. Well, I mean, okay, maybe not. I guess it was pretty bad when they were slaves, but I mean, in
Yes.
modern times, it is worse today than it has been for decades.
Yes.
Because it's causing, little kids don't think about the color of someone's skin. They go to a playground and they just, if another kid wants to share their toy or smiles at them or something like that, that could be a friend. But now schools are teaching kids to pay it. Everything depends upon the color of somebody's skin. And
Yeah.
so it's causing racism, and it's causing segregation. Different kids are learning different things and other kids are learning other things. And it's really raising the temperature of the race wars in our country, and perhaps in Canada as well. I mean, do you teach CRT?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. There's a psychologist in Canada named God Sod, who's written a wonderful book that describes these as idea pathogens, which is a kind of a funny, kind of a strange way of putting it, but it makes sense that they actually get into our psyche and sort of our infections, really. These ideas like CRT. But I wanted to ask you about your other book, and that is Coping with Terrorism. This is a book that you wrote some time ago, but I think this is really relevant based upon, I mean, we've sort of been talking about for the last little while about all these different things that are frightening us and terrorizing us, both internationally, domestically, in our schools, and even when we go shopping and out in our cities. So what are some ways for people watching that they can learn to cope with terrorism? Do you have some suggestions about how we can learn to do that in a way that maybe helps us live more healthy lives, psychologically and emotionally?
Sure. Yes, that book, Coping with Terrorism, Dreams Interrupted, was a book that I wrote that was published in London as the anniversary edition, the first anniversary of their 9/11, which was 7/7.
Right.
And yes, a lot of the things, I mean, I divided the chapters into like children and adolescence and work and love and different areas of our life. Really, the topics, the areas of our life and how terrorists affects us is really pretty similar, still very much the same. And the first thing that people should do to sort of build resilience is to make sure that you keep yourself or make yourself at this point the healthiest you can, both psychologically and physically. Okay. Because whatever kind of attack there is, whether it's your government making crazy rules or things like that, or it is a radical Islamist attack, you need to keep yourself in the best shape possible,
Right.
so that you can be more resilient to whatever comes. So, for example, if you feel that you're having some psychological problem, anxiety, depression, PTSD, some addiction, whatever it is, you should go get help. You should go get treatment, and treatment doesn't consist of just medication. A pill does not cure anything. It helps people, especially people with illnesses like schizophrenia or manic depressive illness, bipolar. You do need to be on medicine, but therapy, no medicine alone will help anybody with whatever it is that they have, that they're dealing with. You have to be in therapy, psychotherapy, talk therapy. And physically, of course, you need to not wait till some kind of an attack or some kind of a threat happens. You need to look into whatever it is that you may be suffering from. If you have thyroid problems or high blood pressure, kind of run-of-the-mill chronic problems, you have to make sure that they are in the best shape possible. Another thing that they're doing, I'm not sure if you might have seen this, but like in New York, they started putting up this both literature and a video, like to try to teach people what to do in case of a nuclear bomb attack. Have you seen that?
No, I hadn't.
I mean, they had that in the news, like they were writing about some new movie coming out. I mean, they were trying to normalize it,
Right.
And of course, Putin keeps threatening to,
Yes.
to
Yes.
send nuclear weapons. But I mean, I never thought I would see it just in the midst of the news, as if,
Yeah.
oh, and by the way, here are some things you can do in case there's a nuclear attack.
Interesting timing with that Oppenheimer film out as well.
Well, yes. This was like maybe 6 months ago or 4
Right.
months ago that I first saw it. But yes. So yes, there were, of course, the first thing to do with a nuclear attack is to get inside and to wash yourself off, and to stock up on potassium iodide. But I'll put that aside, that extreme example aside. But the other thing is, of course, in regard to children, is that you need to get children to talk about and express their feelings about whatever kind of terrorism you want to look at. Like, for example, with radical Islamist terrorism, you need to, like, for example, kids after that happened were playing with an airplane, making an airplane go all around, like playing that they were terrorists because they wanted to identify with the aggressor, to be the strong person, the brave person, or to not be the victim, things like that. And but you need to get kids, and even if it's just other kinds of things like what we've been talking about that are terrorizing, whether it's a teacher trying to convince you to change your sex or gender, or you need to, and the problem is that the dinner table discussions, that used to be the time that everybody would sit down to dinner in a family, and you would ask, how was your day today, and how was school, and why did Sally pull your pigtail? Or I mean, I know I sound like I'm stuck in the you must know Norman Rockwell, the
Oh,
painter.
of course.
Okay.
Yes.
So, that used to be America.
Yeah.
Now, granted, we can't stay at that time forever, but certainly the way of thinking, the morals, the things that those paintings brought out, we should be trying to have forever.
Right.
The families being
Yeah.
together and doing fun things together, fishing, getting ice cream cones, all of that.
Right.
And of course, the flag, being appreciating the flag and saluting the flag and appreciating the national anthem. In America, we just had the World Cup, and I tweeted away about the stories about how our team, wouldn't, half the team didn't sing the national anthem and didn't, salute the flag and so on. I mean, I wrote that they should all be fired. That kind of thing. It's not good for anybody.
Oh.
And that's, by the way, I think that's why they lost so badly, because they had all this negativity that they brought to it.
Yes. It's very sad that, in sports is an example of where it really should be drawing people together and closer together. And maybe that's the best antidote overall to terror, is to draw together and to lend support to each other. And that doesn't seem to be happening as much as it used to, or as much as it should. This has been a very wide-ranging discussion. I really enjoyed talking with you. We've come to the part of the program where we sort of wrap up, and we call this the reading list. And it won't surprise you that today two of your books are featured. You've actually written 4, and I encourage people to go check out Amazon. You can find all of Dr. Carole's books. But the 2 that we've mentioned today, they're the ones that she's talked about. First of all, Coping with Terrorism. And the second one, Lions, Tigers, and Terrorists, Oh My, How to Protect Your Child in a Time of Terror. So Dr. Carole, what we'd like to do is wrap up. Obviously, you're very well read. Are there any books that you would recommend, or sources? It could be a website or anything of that nature, that you would recommend to people who have listened to this conversation that would perhaps enhance or augment their learning or their understanding of some of your work and the things that we've been talking about today?
Well, for one thing, they could go to my website, terroristtherapist.com. And there are lots of videos, and and also I do a podcast called The Terrorist Therapist Show.
Right, I should have mentioned that. Sorry. Yeah, no, I saw that.
You can either see that on the website, or you can find it on podcast places like Renegade Talk Radio. But you can also see the video that I was talking about at the beginning that's going to be on the billboard truck. If you're not planning on being in New York or DC on 9/11, you can just go to my website and watch the video.
Oh, fantastic. Well, again, thank you so much for being our special guest today. It's been a real pleasure sitting down with you and talking with you, learning more about you and your work, and much continued success. I hope you keep writing and doing the podcast. We look forward to following you and learning more as we go.
Well, thank you very much.